Today on Hobby Bench, I'll be painting up a Reaper Bones troll. So I've got a Reaper Bones troll here, and I really like these models. You know, I'm painting up some stuff for a 5 Leagues from the Borderlands campaign, so I definitely need some more monsters. And it's interesting plastic because it doesn't need to be primed. You can pretty much paint right over it. But to make the contrast paints a little bit more, I like to do is a really thin down black coat of paint, and then go ahead and just give it another dry brush of white. And that's what I've done here. For the most part, a lot of time these Reaper Bones will just work fine, but you can see here, let's see, its arm and on the back of its leg. You know, it's interesting. I guess the plastic is a little hydrophobic, and somehow like the thin down black paint just won't adhere to it at all. It just sort of runs off. And this is despite me giving a really good scrub. You lose a little bit of detergent, just a little bit of soap and water, and scrub with a toothbrush, but I still have some areas there that I don't know why. There's just something embedded in the plastic that doesn't allow that thin down water coat of paint to adhere to it. It just pretty much runs clean. So I'm going to go ahead and just hopefully work in a contrast paint and see how it works through. I'm going to be painting up on his belly and on some other sections, maybe on the back of his legs and definitely underneath his jaw. I'm using Orc Skin. I want to try to just get 2 different tones of green here. And so I'm going to do a very nice base coat of this. And like typical contrast paints, I'm just going to be working through one section at a time. Just sort of like let that contrast paint do its work. And here that's what I sort of like, that, you know, that areas of thin down black paint, you know, it really seeps in there, just gives a little bit more of a deeper shade. And some areas where I've got it is highlighted more, it just thins out some. So I'm just carefully working through that. And, you know, just trying to get its paunch and its gut. And some of the areas I think that might have a different tone, that's what I want. And for the rest of the miniature, I'm just going to go ahead and block this in with Troll Green. Go figure. But I'm pretty happy to see it covers very well. I'm just letting that contrast paint do what it does best. You sort of get into those deeper crevices and stuff like that with the black, thin down black paint, and just, you know, give it a little bit more of a shaded look. And what I'm sort of happy to see here is that, you know, definitely for sure in an area I've got that apparently I guess the thin down coat of paint didn't work well. You know, definitely this contrast paint goes over that. And I've seen this quite a bit with the Bones miniatures, but, you know, fortunately, if you're working with the water acrylics, they'll cover pretty well, typically. So now that I've had that done, I went ahead and just did a dry brush of uniform green, just to sort of add a little bit more depth to everything on that. And now I'm really going to just do a much more extreme contrast and dry brush there using lime green. I'm really just going to jump up the color contrast quite a bit using this really bright green. I want to do this to pick out the scales on the back and highlight some of the areas more in the upper parts of his arms areas, around his head and such. You got these ridges in the back plate. So first I'm just going to go ahead and just give it a dry brush. And, you know, really just, you know, bring out a lot of those details. And just sort of make that extreme color there, you know, just make it pop a lot more. So rather than just going for a subtle shade and a subtle gradation of colors, you know, I'm just going to amp it up. And now I'm just going to do the same thing. It's thinned down a little bit more. I'm doing that lime green. I'm just doing some edge highlighting here along its ears, along its face. And now I'm going to start going through and actually picking out individual scales. And this is a little tedious, but, you know, I definitely always want to make these things really stand out quite a bit. And just, you know, bring your eye to certain areas in miniatures, like along its back and stuff like that. It's got such neat detail. I just really want to highlight those. So I'm just going to go ahead and use this lime green and do that. And you can see here, I'm also just, you know, picking out a little bit more edges on its face and such, and around its ears, just to give it some more gradation and color. You know, you want to be careful with this. You try not to get in between the scales. You know, if I do that, you know, I'm going to have to go back and clean that up again. And, you know, that's what I sort of have to do a couple spots there. But for the most part, it's a little tedious, but just working through that, you know, highlighting each of those individual scales really help bring that color out and, you know, just make them just really stand out quite a bit. And that's really what I'm trying to do there. So I've got that done, and, you know, I've got them all highlighted out. You can just see how this just pops out quite a bit. So I'm going to keep going on with that. Just more of an odder shade of contrast there. It's using tan yellow. I really want to make them even see the fur on its back sort of stand out a little bit more. You can think it, rather than just like working out with more shades of green, I'm just going to go with something that's just completely different. But it's a little bit of a neutral color, so I think it'll work. You know, you've got that base coat of green that's underneath it, like sort of lays down that foundation. And even though like I'm highlighting, like, you know, with a light tan color, I think it works out pretty well. It sort of works a little natural there, but it still, you know, brings your eye towards a lot of this fur on his back and the back of his arms. That's what we're working with there. And this is giving it a pretty good dry brush. Now I'm going to keep working with this tan yellow. I really want to make its teeth stand out. So I'm going to be using that also. It's like I like that color. It's just like it's teeth full of plaque and gunk and stuff like that. So rather than going, let's say, with a white, you know, I want to just like this yellow look. And, you know, looking at it too, I want to get that tongue to stand out a little bit more. So I actually might use that as a base coat to that tan yellow, and then maybe just give it a highlight of some green. But that's what I was working through, just carefully picking out these teeth and just giving it a nice even coat. You want to try to be careful here, just try not to get in the areas that have the green base of its tissue, let's say, in its mouth, you know, and if you do that, then you just have to clean that up. And that's what you can see there. I've gone ahead and went back with Orc Skin and gone over that tongue, and you can see that it has a nice lighter green. It's pretty cool. And so now I'm going to just add a little bit more depth. I'm going to do a little bit of blending here with tan yellow and pale sand. It's like a 1-to-1. It's thinned out a little bit. And now I'm going to leave the base itself is just going to leave tan yellow. And then working on the middle of the tooth and up to the tip and the edges there, I'm going to be using more pale sand. The idea is just to have a general blending of colors a little bit more. So rather than just like leaving it just one shade, I'm just going to throw in a different color there. And just, you know, have a slight transition. For these longer teeth there, I think that'll work out pretty well. And so that's what I'm just carefully going through. And, you know, I may go back a little bit later, like maybe on the tips itself, I might just use that pale sand just to bring out a little bit more highlight, maybe on those edges there. But it's pretty subtle, and I think in this light you can't quite catch it, but, you know, that's what I sort of like out there. It just has that general transition of colors. I'm going to be doing the same thing for the claws, but again, I want to try to just pick out some odd colors, something that's a little bit different from the, say, a green. So here I'm just going to go with a brown. I'm using flat brown. I'm going to be going over all the claws on its hands and on its feet. I just like that. You can see it's just got this base of this green color, and then you have this contrast of this darker brown. It's a natural look, but it helps, you know, your eyes sort of get drawn to that a little bit more. And you just want to be very careful here, just trying to get in the areas like maybe more in his hand and really just focus on the tips of his claws. That's what it's working through here. I'm just going to go through all the nails on its hands and on its feet. Now I've got that done. I'm going to sort of do the same thing I did before. And here I'm just going to be using beige brown. Maybe a little bit more beige brown, like maybe 2-to-1 with the flat brown there. And the idea is to sort of blend that in just a little bit, but really just, you know, definitely on the tips and stuff like that. I want to have that lighter brown. And you can just leave it, you know, as is with just that brown color, but I think just adding that a little bit of that blending there, I think just adds just a little more life to it. Just, you know, just that extra touch that really stands out. And I like this too because it's that lighter brown. So again, you know, your eyes just sort of get drawn a little bit more to the tips of those claws. And that's what just working through and doing that. And there you go. It's pretty much done. I went back and just used red for its eyes to make that stand out a bit more. But there you go. I like that troll. I just love the way it looks. It's nothing fancy, just pretty much a basic paint job. But, you know, I really like the way it came out. And you can just see there, your eyes are just drawn to that tongue and those claws and its hands and the fangs that it's got down and those teeth. And this, you know, using that really bright green, it just really makes those scales stand out, little armored plates in the back. And I really like the way he turned out. So I just used a basic acrylic paint and a little bit of a dry brush of a lighter gray on its base, and that's pretty much it. So there you go. Nothing fancy, but I'm happy I turned it out. Can't wait to get him on the tabletop.